This is Pin Mill in Suffolk on a beautiful sunny afternoon, and I've decided to sketch this scene today of a pink cottage next to a little gallery down by the river. And I've been asked if I could share a little bit about how I approach a sketch from start to finish, so I'm going to try and do that here. It's definitely not a how-to video, it's just a how I do it video, and the ways that I've found that work for me. The first thing I do is look for the highest point so I know roughly where to start on the page, whether it's a chimney, a church spire, or just the top of a building. Even if that's not the part of the sketch where I'm going to start drawing, I find it's important to notice it at the beginning so I don't run out of page later, and also be aware of what's at the bottom so you don't fall off the bottom of the page. I do find I have a tendency to draw things too big, and I'm trying to work on that, so at least knowing what's at the very top and the very bottom of the scene helps me to try and fit everything on the page. So once I've established and I'm aware of the highest point, I start my sketch with either pencil or sometimes go straight in with pen, and this depends on a variety of factors: how much time I've got, how confident I'm feeling, and how complex the scene is. I recently sketched this scene in North Yorkshire and I started with pencil, but I soon realised that with the scene this detailed, doing the line work effectively twice, once with pencil and once again with pen, would not only take ages but also probably take all the fun out of it and become quite boring. But this scene is a bit more simple, so I used pencil, and you can see I've drawn the outlines of the main shapes, and even though I haven't actually bothered or needed to draw the chimney that marks the highest point, by recognising it earlier I've left enough space and hopefully won't fall off the page at the top. So I'm now going to go in with a few-day nib pen, a pen with a bent nib, and it's much easier because I can use the pencil lines as a guide, although I don't feel the need to stick rigidly to them. If I feel that something is slightly off, I'll make slight adjustments and tweaks with the line positions as I go over it in pen, gradually adding more detail as I go. Here I can see that there are chairs around a table, but I can't quite see them clearly, and when you can't quite see something, I find it's best not to try to make sense of it. Or as I always say in my favourite totally overused quote, if you see a muddle, draw a muddle. A handy tip I learnt for drawing door frames and window frames is, unless they're really distant, I always add at least 2 lines to them to make sure they look 3D. Otherwise there's a danger of them looking like the windows of the play schoolhouse. You probably have to be British and of a certain age to know what I'm talking about, but it looks like this. The pencil I used in the first stage is a watercolour pencil, so most of the lines will disappear and blend in when I add the watercolour wash without me needing to use an eraser to rub them out. Inevitably some will still be visible, but I kind of like that effect, and it's just a personal thing. I usually choose a blue pencil if I'm sketching an outdoor scene. If I use something like yellow, then obviously adding a blue wash for a sky would end up green. So it's just something to bear in mind if you are using a watercolour pencil. Pick your first colour wisely. When I'm drawing angles such as roofs, I imagine a clock face to try and help me get the angle right. So the ink I'm using is platinum carbon ink, which is water resistant, so that when I come to apply the watercolour wash I don't just end up with a big smudged blurry mess. And when I'm adding brickwork and roof tiles, I just draw in a few at random. I've seen lots of artists who draw or paint them all in and I think it looks really effective. It's just not the slightly looser style that I'm aiming for. But I do suggest you add at least some to hint at them. Otherwise, roofs and walls can look just like a big boring expanse of one colour when you come to apply the watercolour. Stone walls are quite fun because you can be a bit more random and artistic with your shapes here to add interest. Likewise, when you're painting foliage, I've found that if you add a little bit of the detail to hint at where the leaves are, it can avoid great big expanses of green. So the line work is now finished, and this ink dries really quickly, so I'm straight away going to add a watercolour wash using Winsor & Newton professional grade paints in the pocket field box. A lot of the houses in the countryside around here are painted what's known as Suffolk pink. I don't have a pink in this palette or a white to mix with my red, so I'm just going to improvise with a very watered down red. Another tip I heard that I found helpful for this particular style is to use the biggest brush that you can. Obviously, if you're going for a more detailed look, then totally ignore that. But for this style, I find that it works for me. And I'm using a sports wristband to wipe my brush on in case you think I'm just wiping it on my sleeve. Sap Green is not really a colour I like at all for foliage. I just don't find it at all natural, but a tip I got from another watercolourist is to add just a little touch of red, and that really helps. I've also mixed it with a little yellow here to bring out where the sun is shining on the leaves. I quite like to paint leaves and shrubbery quite wet on wet, so that the greens and yellows blend in with each other a little to make it a bit more natural, hopefully. For shadows, I tend to mix a little blue with some Payne's grey. And with shadows, I used to have some sort of mental block about them, I think, because they're not really there. They're not something concrete that you can touch. I was always a little bit cautious and my shadows were a bit tentative. But I've since learnt to just be much bolder and go for it, and I think it's given my sketches more depth, which is why I sometimes get frustrated when I'm painting outside in winter and the paper just doesn't dry in time for me to get that depth. Today's a nice warm sunny day, so the paper is actually drying very quickly, but when I got home I did add some highlights which I'll move on to later. So this is as far as I got painting on location and plein air. And when I got home I added a few more highlights and shadows using a Jelly Roll white gel pen and a Pentel pocket brush pen. And someone did ask me in the comments a few videos back if I'd show the extra highlights and shadows that I add when I get home, because I usually forget to turn the camera on. So I'm just showing you that here. I basically randomly add a few touches with the white Jelly Roll pen where the light falls, and maybe on, say, window frames, and for example if there's some writing on a menu or a sandwich board like this. But I do have to hold myself back a bit because it's very easy to overdo this, or I find it very easy to overdo it, and it can start to look a bit cartoon-like if I do that. I don't mind that style, but yeah, I do rein myself in a bit. And likewise, when I switch to the black pen, it is very black and very heavy, so it's really easy to overdo it and completely ruin your work. So I try to use it very sparingly. And that is my whole process from start to finish, and how I approach an urban sketch. So please do let me know in the comments if you found the video useful at all. And if you are new to the channel and enjoyed it, please do feel free to like and subscribe, because it really does help the channel. And as always, thank you very much for watching, and happy sketching.